All right, good morning. Appreciate everybody being here today and coming out here to this beautiful part of Kentucky and being a part of this really cool initiative. I appreciate Kentucky State University and the College of Agriculture for inviting us out. There's some really good resources over there right now that I want to encourage you to visit. Before you leave here today, I'm going to talk a little bit about my story and kind of how we got to where we are today. Deployed to Iraq in 2003 and 2004 during initial invasion and worked at enemy prisoner of war camps. There's a couple, Camp Bucca, and there's Abu Ghraib prison near Baghdad, about 20 minutes west. One thing I noticed, that if you work in a prison, you feel like you are in prison, right? I talk to the correctional officers about that all the time. Man, that's a tough job, right? So when I come back home from there, I left active duty and went into the Army Reserve. That was a that was a culture shock at that point, but I wanted to kind of finish out my RR time still doing something for this country. I love this country. I love serving this country. I would do it again if I ever had to. Not in shape like I used to be, but that's okay. You can always get there. So I'd hope they give me notice, but if we ever had to do something like that, I would be more than happy to do it. When I came home from deployment in Iraq, I had some challenges. I still have challenges. I want to be clear on that. For the folks who have seen war and combat, you don't necessarily ever forget that. I had some relational challenges, I had some physical challenges, and had some mental challenges, right, from the experiences that I was part of while I was there for those 16 months. I very quickly began to notice differences in the way that I was behaving, differences in some of my values, and just an overall, I was like a different man. Although I wish I could say at that point I was who I would have wanted to be. As I matured, I went to Iraq. I turned 21 and 22 there, so I was a very young man. And when I got home, I wasn't exactly the mature man that I wanted to be. I was mature in other ways, really basically mature in the way to handle violence, right? And so as I was navigating all those differences and trying to figure out what my new normal was and just trying to get back to life, I had family members and fellow employees in the civilian and still in the Army Reserves, and some people in the general public that I was around would notice, some abnormal behaviors, right? Some stuff that I didn't really recognize because it just had been what I've experienced for the last year and some change there. And I thought it was just part of me progressing through life. I didn't think there was anything necessarily wrong with some of my behaviors, but come to find out, I was doing some things that wasn't typical. So at this time, because I was in the reserves, I went to work for a company as an operations manager in Mount Sterling. They were a contractor of Nestle Foods. If you're familiar with that part of the state, it was a company called TLC. And I had a boss there who was a retired Marine. And over the course of about a year, he started noticing some things that he would bring to my attention. And it was very hard for him because who likes to have those tough conversations? But nonetheless, he sat me down one day and he said, "Jeremy, there are some things that are going on that you need to check into, right? You need to go see somebody. Your cognitive processing's off. There's some things that your employees are saying you're unapproachable. And you're having a hard time staying awake when you're here because I wasn't sleeping real good at night. All those good things And ultimately, he asked me that day to resign from that position. And I think it's an important part of this story because my initial response to that was, man, is this what brotherhood is? I just had a brand new baby at that time. He's 13 now, but just had a brand new child and, obviously need money, right? And I just couldn't believe that he was asking me to resign. I thought that, we should take care of each other. But ultimately, that would be one of the best things that ever happened because then I did go and I visited my friends over at the VA and started going through some testing and some things like that to recognize that there were many things that I was ignoring that I shouldn't have been. So sometimes, what seems to be hard in the moment can be a blessing later on down the road. I think it's important to notice. And if you've lived any amount of life at all, you recognize that that's probably the case. So when the journey and the treatment began, I started to look for resources, both in my community and beyond. I was desperate to try to get on the other side of these issues that were stemming from my service to the country. So I want to dive into why it's important for veterans to seek resources. I will tell you, in 2004, there wasn't a whole lot of organizations out there waving their hands saying, hey, we're here, let's help. The war had just kicked off in Iraq. We'd been in Afghanistan a couple years at that point. There were some organizations that were forming. I think in 2003, in fact, the Wounded Warrior Project had just started. They were still an organization that were filling backpacks. Now we all know who, Wounded Warrior Project is. One organization in particular that was around that did assist me personally, that's here today, is USA Cares. They were there when I needed a hand up, so I appreciate them. So make sure you check in with them and you share their mission with others. They've been doing this for a long time, and they've helped a tremendous amount of people, including myself. To make the transition from military to civilian life as seamless as possible, you need to connect with organizations who specialize in that, right? The transition, I don't know how many veterans we have in here, I assume that many of you are, was very difficult. And it's very difficult whether you have issues from your service or not. Just the change in culture is very challenging. The good news is I think now companies are starting to invite people to come in to teach military culture because it is different. So that there's a little bit easier transition. But that's one of the biggest stressors for veterans who are getting out of the military. And when we think about that transition, it's different for everybody. It depends on your level of education, depends on your MOS, your military occupational specialty in the military, what you've done, how that transfers into the civilian world. It's your support system. There's a lot of factors that determine whether or not you're going to have a successful transition or how hard it will be for you. But I will tell you that now I know, and now there's been, over the course of the last 20 years, there have been organizations out there who have developed and are really good at that. In 2004, like I said, there wasn't a whole lot going on. The challenge then became convincing veterans to take advantage of assistance and of these organizations. And that's usually one of my favorite subjects to talk about because I'll even talk about myself here. It is very hard for veterans to admit that they need something on all levels, right? We just have this sense of pride, and it's not inherently bad, but we do have this sense of pride that we can take care of it. We're very selfless people. You almost have to be in order to sign up to do the work that we have to do across the pond and even here in the United States. So asking for help isn't easy. And then you consider the training, right? The training that we go through, we're taught to suck it up and drive on. How many of y'all heard that, right? Suck it up and drive on, right? Or adapt and overcome, right? It's just something that's ingrained in us, and that's what we're taught and what we process at a very young age while we're still essentially developing into men and women. And the good news is, in country and in theater, that saves lives. It works. It's helpful. The bad news is, it doesn't always translate when you come home. And for most of us, the majority of our life is lived here. And so essentially we're taking culture in a combat zone, we're trying to apply it here in the United States amongst folks in the community, and we're wondering why it's not effective, and we're wondering why they don't understand it. We're wondering why it's such a challenge. And it's a challenge because that's only 97% of us, right? 97% of us in this country only know what that means. So every day you walk out your door, you're at a little bit of a disadvantage, right? But that isn't always a bad thing. You're at a little bit of disadvantage because 97% of people may not understand, but I can assure you that many people want to understand. But I will also say that it's really good and makes me really proud that they don't. Because the fact that they don't understand means we did our job, right? It means we did what we had to do across the pond so that we don't have to worry about some of these things here. So it's a blessing at the same time. But it's also a veteran's obligation to help educate people who don't understand. We can't simply say you don't understand and walk away, right? We need to help these people understand, because I don't know one person that I've ever met that just didn't want to know how to help veterans. I get that question all the time. I want to help. I want to know how. I want to help. I just don't know how. I don't want to overstep my bounds and talk about something that may be sensitive to you that maybe you don't want to disclose to me, but I do want to do something. So that's when we step up and say, hey, one way you can do that is if you're a business owner, do you hire veterans, right? If you work in an organization, do you have opportunities for veterans to come and get to know what you do? Do you have a veteran resource group? There's different ways you can ask the question, right? And the good news is places like Humana and Young Brands and Ford and organizations like that, they absolutely do have those organizations. One thing we have to do, I think, as a society is to normalize accepting assistance and getting help within our community, right? And I think, again, it's up to us and other veteran organizations who are over there in the right to help see that happens. There's roughly 257,000 veterans in the state of Kentucky. And Kentucky, in reality, isn't that big of a state. I think we have about 4 million people, give or take. So with 257,000 of us being veterans, the chances are somebody that maybe isn't a veteran at least knows of one or knows somebody who knows one, right? And so it's just important that we're encouraging people to go get the help they need, right? For the veterans out there who are maybe struggling with something today, it's important for you to know that you matter. It's important to know that you deserve an opportunity to have a life that you enjoy, right? It's important to know that you signed a blank check to this country, and you were willing to put your life on the line for others. And according to my beliefs, there's no greater display of love than that, right? And so you deserve to get the help that you need. And the organizations that offer this, I know that sometimes there's also that thought in the veteran community is that someone deserves it worse than me, or more than me, I should say. Someone deserves it more than me. I wish you wouldn't tell yourself that, because that's not true, right? It doesn't matter if you deployed or not. It doesn't matter if you did 2 years or you did 20. You signed the dotted line. You were willing to do whatever the United States wanted you to do in whatever capacity they wanted you to do it. And that alone, that enters you into that club where you are qualified and you are deserving of the benefits that these organizations want to provide to you. And I can tell you, I sit in these meetings all the time with different organizations, and they want to help. Some of the biggest conversations we have is how do we translate the desire to help to the veterans that we want to help, to where they will come and get the help. We don't want to just show up in the office and come up with these programs. We want to implement them. We want those who need it to get better or to gain some understanding from some of the stuff that they're dealing with. And I'm speaking on behalf. I imagine all the organizations over there feel the same way. They really want to help. As of the latest report from the Department of VA, we lose 17.2 veterans per day to suicide. This is really no surprise to a lot of you, but some people think about when it was 22 a day, and a lot of organizations have named themselves after that. The good news is it has decreased. The bad news is there still is a number, right? We want to get that number as close to zero as possible. We're losing more service members here at home than we ever did on the battlefield, and that's just heartbreaking. You almost expect that there's that opportunity when you go across the pond and you preserve our way of life here. You expect that could happen. That's not a surprise, right? I remember a time where when I was there, I accepted death because I didn't really know that I was coming back, right? So I understand what that looks like. But the last thing that we want to hear is in our own homeland, when we have all these organizations and all these patriotic people in the country who want to help, that we're taking our own lives. And a lot of that is because we isolate, which is a killer in the community, right? And so we need to get involved with organizations. We need to get involved with our communities. Many vets, you'll hear, I hear it all the time, Jeremy, I'm not that bad off. I don't really need to call anybody. I don't really need to go to the VA or go seek therapy. I didn't do a whole lot. There was only a few times where I got in any kind of conflict. We tell ourselves these things, but the reality is I can't tell you how many funerals I've been to people who told me that same thing when they said, I'm not that bad off. Well, it's a culmination of a lot of different events, right? And we just want to make sure that we're focused on that. Veterans should know that these organizations work diligently every day to research and to understand the needs of the veteran. It does change. Our vision statement at Veterans Club is very loose because we want to be able to pivot when we have to. We had to do that for COVID. That was a very tough time. I'm sure it was in most organizations, whether you're a nonprofit or for-profit. But we were able to adjust just because we were able to pivot. And we still had 85 events that year for veterans and their families to help them overcome the challenges, not only of what they always have been challenged with, but the additional challenge of what this pandemic looked like and the uncertainty that was behind that. I recognize many veterans are really busy in their careers, raising families and doing life, but I want to encourage you to make time to take care of yourself. A good friend of mine says, it's a very basic illustration, but I think it's powerful. He always tells me, he says, Jeremy, when you're on a plane and they tell you, if you need to use the oxygen mask, they tell you to put yours on first, before your kids, before your spouse, before anybody else. The reason why they do that is because you can't do anything for anyone else if you're not taking care of yourself, right? And as veterans, as people who have been taught selfless service, we have a tendency to negate our own needs. And there are people out there counting on you. You all are still leaders. You're assets to this community. You're assets to this world. And I just want to encourage you that it's not weak to go get help. It's not weak to talk to another vet who understands. It's in fact, it takes a lot more courage to do that than to pretend like everything's okay. Faking it till we make it it ends in destruction in our lives. And so I just want to encourage you to make sure that stigma falls away and you get what you need. I want to end with this. Because I decided, to receive care, and I've been going to the VA since, 2008 maybe, something like that. I can't even remember. So all my, pretty much all my care is at the VA. They've been good to me. But because of that, now I'm up here today being able to encourage you to make sure that you're taking care of yourself and making sure you're understanding the resources that are available to you. I can assure you, had I not taken care of myself and did the things that I needed to do, I would not be standing up here today, and that I know. There were times I didn't do it for me because I wasn't ever really important. We're selfless people. There were times that I didn't do it for my family, but there were times where I did it for the folks out here who serve this country, right? Because we'll do anything for each other. We've proven that, right? The brotherhood and the sisterhood runs strong in the military. And so if you don't want to do it for yourself, think about your brother to your right and left. Do it for them. Do it for them. Be around for them. Be healthy for them so that you can help them overcome some of those challenges. I appreciate this opportunity to speak to you all today, and we'll be around over here if you have any questions. Thanks a lot for making the drive out and being a part of this. I appreciate everybody here who's a veteran. Thank you for your service. Every organization here represented to take care of veterans, thank you all too for what you do. I appreciate it. Thank you.